Welcome to the WesWorld podcast, hosted by Maggie Elmer, Dr. Scott Kisker, and Dr. David Watson. This podcast is about all things Wesleyan and beyond. Hello, and welcome to another episode of WesWorld. I'm Maggie Elmer, and I'm here with
Scott Kisker,
David Watson.
And we're back for another conversation, you guys.
You're back.
All right. Today, so fun.
Yeah, well, I thought we might.
This was David's idea.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea.
This is a monthly
just not
podcast,
fun.
so it may be a little while before, there may be a little distance from this event, but no doubt something else terrible will happen between now and then. But I thought we would talk about some of the problematic trends related to anti-Semitism that we're seeing. It was for a good while a very pronounced issue on the political and ideological left. It has recently migrated into the political and ideological right. And I think that this is really quite alarming and something that we need to address socially. I'm not sure what you do about it. And I'm not entirely sure where it came from, why it has arisen, what feels like kind of on a steep incline pretty quickly. Now, I do think some of the actions of the state of Israel have had something to do with this, and we could talk about these things if you want to go there. But it is an issue for Christians to address, for churches to address. It's something that we need to help parishioners think about if we're pastors or teachers. And I guess maybe where we should start would be kind of the rise over the last few years, a pretty steep rise in left-wing anti-Semitism.
Well, do we want to define what we mean by
terms.
anti-Semitism first?
When I use the term, I just mean Jew hatred.
Okay.
Do you all want to nuance that a little bit?
I mean, I think that is probably how most people use the word. I think I don't know. I have lots of feelings about the difference between this particular brand of bigotry versus others. It's got its own strange. I don't know how to say it, but
Definitely has its own history.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that it is significantly different, at least like in Europe, from gypsy hatred, or it's an ethnic, it's a hatred, or hatred is such a strong word. And FYI, hating is bad.
Yeah.
So, like, if Christians are defending hatred, if that's how we're going to define anti-Semitism, hating is bad. You should just repent. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ethnic, prejudice and dislike of one ethnic group for another. That's what we call tribalism, and it isn't limited to the Jewish tribe, but it's certainly become more acceptable somehow to voice one's, hatred of that particular ethnic group recently. Very recently, which is it sort of caught people off guard.
I think one of the things I think that is unique about anti-Semitism that I don't necessarily see with a lot of other ethnic prejudice groups is paranoia. And by that I mean, like, there's
the conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories are so weird.
The Jewish space lasers thing. Yeah.
Or whatever. I mean, I don't necessarily. When I, think about, European, like you just said, Scott, or about ethnic groups like gypsies or Roma people, or, even African Americans or Latinos or whatever kind of strange, bigoted things you hear about those people groups, you don't necessarily also hear along with it some sort of like weird narrative of dominant control behind the scenes.
Because the Jews as an ethnic group are successful in communities where they're a minority out of proportion to what their size is,
Sure.
as a general rule.
Right.
Because to survive, Jews in the world had to be educated, plus, the Torah and all of that is
Yeah.
part of that. But they had to excel in certain areas that were allowed to them because of prejudice, and so they tend to be excellent in areas that the modern world happens to value.
Yeah.
So,
And there's also, there is the added complexity of the relationship between Jews and Christians in the early church,
Yeah.
Jews and Jesus in Scripture, the ways that gets interpreted sometimes, including within the church fathers, and then up in through the Reformation, we're familiar with Martin Luther's work concerning the Jews and their lies, which was really not his best moment. And then if you look at the Holocaust didn't come out of thin air. It's not like in the 1930s people in Germany just started
suddenly
hating.
decided they
Yeah.
didn't
Oh, Jews
like
are
or
bad.
trust Jewish people. Yeah.
Right. Like that was the culmination of really centuries of Jew hatred that had been manifested in pogroms for
Yeah.
many times in many different places.
But also, the Jews were in Germany because Germany tolerated the presence of Jews, whereas they'd been expelled from England
Yeah.
and other nations in Europe. And so you can see this in some of the. Maybe this helps explain a little bit some of the populist right-wing aversion to Judaism today. The competition, the seeing an ethnic group in one's own nation that is not one's ethnic group succeed beyond what you are succeeding, right, makes it easy for a populist uprising to locate their problems succeeding in that group with a scapegoat. And a successful minority is an obvious target.
And that's certainly a narrative that Hitler took advantage of.
Well,
Germany.
and it's a narrative, honestly, that has been taken advantage of, in our country right now today. So the anti-immigrant sentiment is largely framed in the sense of these are people who are taking jobs from the American working class.
Sure.
And that's what makes it popular. Literally
Yeah.
in the thing. So it's understandable, and if you are a person who wants to gain political power by appealing to a group that feels already that they have had a raw deal in the culture where they are centered, right? Finding someone to explain their lack of a scapegoat to explain their lack of success in the culture that is their own will get your votes.
Yeah, definitely. So, but as Scott, you pointed out, anti-Semitism has been around forever, but in recent years in the U.S. and in Europe, it has become socially acceptable again to express anti-Jewish sentiments. Some people might talk about this as the Overton window, that it's just kind of the range of things that you can talk about in polite company and not be ostracized. And I think on kind of the left wing, ideological left wing of culture, this has been actually going on for some time, particularly on university campuses. But after the October 7th massacre and then the resulting reaction by the State of Israel invading Gaza, it became much more acute. And
a lot of that is part of the left-wing narrative that colonialism, bad, white people, bad, Jews, white, Israel, colonizer.
Yeah, Jews are white or white adjacent. Yeah, yeah. And it does, in a lot of ways, that narrative shows an incredible ignorance of history. including the formation of the State of Israel. It's not that it's not like Jews the State of Israel is formed by
A
the United
landless
United
people, yeah.
Nations in 1948,
Yeah.
which is not exactly a right-wing
No.
group, and it was formed because
In response to the Holocaust.
in response to the
Holocaust,
Holocaust, because the world realized there's no safe place for Jews,
They are landless people.
and well, they were.
They were.
Now
yeah.
they have a place, and if you go to, I've been to Israel.
Which, oddly enough, they want to defend.
No way.
Yeah.
So I've been to Israel 3 times, which does not make me in any sense an expert on Israel, but it did impress me, like the militancy of the Israelis around defending their homeland,
Yeah.
and they are surrounded by nations that want to destroy them, that hate them. They've been invaded by those nations in recent memory. And
Very recent, in fact.
yeah. I was thinking about, the 1960s, but yes, the October 7th business was horrible. I mean, that was the greatest mass killing of Jews since the Holocaust. And so there is an incredible militancy. I remember touring Yad Vashem, which is the Jewish Holocaust Museum. It's just devastating to go through, as is the one in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
But they were training soldiers, by taking them through Yad Vashem, training them on their history. Here's what can happen if we don't defend our homeland. It's very clear to me that there is no chance at all that they are going to relent on matters related to
Yeah.
their own safety and the protection of their borders. I don't see a 2-state solution coming forward. It could happen, maybe, but I would be shocked, actually, if it did. So, but all that is to say that there has to be some historical knowledge related to why we got the State of Israel to start with and how it was formed. It wasn't like the European colonies in Africa or India or something like that. It was a completely different set of motivations and a completely different set of mechanics with regard to how the State of Israel was established. It also, it was also much smaller when it was established than after it was invaded by 5 armies of surrounding nations. And then that's how they got the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And
all of the Sinai, which they gave back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is the wars have consequences kind of.
Yeah.
If you start a war and you lose territory.
Yeah, funny how that works.
Yeah, there's huge portions of what used to be Greater Germany that are now in Poland, oddly enough.
Now, yeah. Now that's not to
Or
say
Russia.
That's not to say that the State of Israel isn't morally culpable for the things that it does. And having been in the West Bank a few times, I think that I don't like the way that the State of Israel has governed the Palestinian areas. I think there is some real cruelty, especially by more radicalized wings within Israel. So, for example, I was meeting with Christians who lived in the West Bank, and who were saying that radicalized Jewish settlers would come into their territory and just tear down their olive trees. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to drive them out.
Right.
And the settlements that have happened within the West Bank, I think, don't help Israel's cause at all. And so, and there are a number of other things. The positioning of the wall that's between the West Bank and Israel proper is also, something that you could really kind of point a finger at and say the way in which you've done this seems targeted to make life as miserable as possible for a number of the Palestinians. So I don't think that Israel gets a free pass with regard to its own moral culpability, but at the same time, to suggest that we should not have a state of Israel anymore, what are the implications of that? I don't like those at all.
And also that Israel is a democracy, which means that, like other democratic republics, there are factions within itself who are all competing
Yeah.
Right.
for political power, and the consequences of those elections, if we believe in liberal government, means that walls get placed in certain places.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
decisions get made about what's allowed because of the populace that is voting. If you,
Yeah.
there is obviously democracy is always not great for minorities.
Although
This
there are
country's
Arabs in the
history is
Knesset.
clear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
As far as that goes. And if you end up voting ethnically, that's going to be bad for ethnic minorities. That is
Yeah.
for sure.
So, Israel, and I do support the state of Israel, but I also don't think that I think the state of Israel, I think a lot of the criticism of the actions of the state of Israel is valid, just like I support the government of the U.S., but I think a lot of the criticism of our government.
Right.
It's
government
not a
Or-
monolith.
or
It's not
the
one
United
thing.
Kingdom and
Right,
think the government of the
right.
United Kingdom is completely insane.
Yeah. Or Canada.
Or
Okay.
I don't want to
Yeah,
go there, but
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
So so this is a good foundation to establish and talk about how the state of Israel was sort of created, and just some of where anti-Semitism has come from, and like you've said, no one, especially not democratic nations, they are not monolithic in their views and in their expressions of the liberties associated with democracy.
Right.
And now, in our own context, and I think that this is an important conversation to have, just in terms of Christians here and what's happening in the United States. One of my fears, I feel like I see this, is there's a real lack of internal moderation between our relationships with faith and our relationships with political ideologies and platforms. And I have always, we've talked about this many, many times, but I am particularly concerned about it around this issue, especially since it seems to have just gone mainstream
Yeah.
in a
Right.
way that doesn't seem to be being corrected in a way that I personally would like to see,
Well, to your first point, I think Wesleyan people, Methodist people, are particularly vulnerable to political and ideological capture because we don't have a Wesleyan political theology. There's been so little work on this. Ted Weber has done work on this, but by and large, that is a lacuna in our corporate life and one that we need to address. It does seem like, especially in the mainline denominations, you get a whole lot of talk about divestment from Israel,
Yeah.
whole movements around divestment from Israel. And there's not much sense that the state of Israel is also an important institution globally and within the Middle East. It is the only liberal democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And it is our only real ally within the Middle East. And so in terms of politics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have never been on board with the divestment movement. But that is extremely popular, more popular now that you have the divisions within mainline Protestantism where the conservatives have essentially left and groups like the United Methodist Church or the PCUSA or the Episcopal Church are increasingly left-wing in their ideology.
And this is also an interpretation of the history of the ending of apartheid in South Africa, that you apply the economic pressure through divestment. I mean, when I was in college, that was the big thing. We had people sleeping in tents on the front lawn of my college for divesting the college from any investments in South Africa.
They were camping.
They were camping, exactly. Well, in a similar way to what I mean. This is what they were doing
Yeah.
on the front lawn of Columbia University as well. So that was the thing, and I think it's sort of naive to believe that however many students were camping on the front lawn of Swarthmore College back in 1986 or 85 is what led to the end of apartheid in South Africa.
That's probably not what did it, but
Rather than some incredible bravery on the part of
Yeah.
de Klerk and other people who, were willing to say, this has got to end. We've got to let Nelson Mandela out of prison. We've got to allow real democracy of all ethnic groups in this country.
the South African government was like, wait a minute, there are kids camping on the lawn at Swarthmore? Well, this changes everything.
Well, I mean, I don't want to minimize completely any economic pressure. Certainly, some, divestment of major, endowments
Yeah.
from major institutions
Yeah,
can
sure.
have a pressured impact on things. But nonetheless, I don't want to get too. But it's this interpretation of history that this is what X led to Z. It's the student protests that led to the end of the
Right.
Vietnam War. It's the student protests that led to the end of apartheid. Therefore, the student protests now can lead to the changes in the policies in Israel that we're looking to make.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that this has become, so moving back in our conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
A few years ago, this began to become very pronounced on college campuses.
Yeah.
And especially in protests on college campuses. In some of these protests, Jewish students were really under threat of bodily harm.
Yeah.
And you do have the chance of from the river to the sea. And what does that mean? I mean, that
means wipe out
is-
all the Jews
Yeah,
from Israel.
essentially,
It's a
get the
genocidal
Jews
chant.
out of Israel, the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That's Israel.
Yeah.
And so, if you free Palestine from the river to the sea,
You eliminate Israel.
you eliminate Israel. And Jewish students in particular understood the implications of that. But there were also things far more nefarious
And this also
than chanting.
has an Islamic theocratic
Yeah.
internationalist move to it, right? I mean, the existence of Israel, it is anathema to the hoped for caliphate.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that has translated into, so that combined with what you mentioned earlier, which is kind of the kind of knee-jerk reaction to anything that sounds like colonialism,
Yeah.
has had a strong impact on college campuses. And, so I think, for example, at least at the beginning, when the Trump administration withheld funds from Harvard, and when it was 3 schools that were called to account before Congress, right? It was Harvard, Columbia, and Penn. Right. I don't think necessarily those actions were inappropriate. I think if you're receiving federal funding and you're allowing blatant anti-Semitism, if you refuse to take responsibility for the safety of your Jewish students on your campus,
You're allowing a hostile environment for a minority group on your campus.
Yeah.
right. And so there
It
should
sort
be
of
some
doesn't matter if
consequences.
that's
Yeah.
black kids or Asian kids or whatever.
Yeah. So what happens when you're allowing for hostile views within the governing party?
Yeah, so that brings us to right-wing anti-Semitism now, which has emerged publicly in a kind of a more recent development, but is nevertheless really come forward with a lot of strength. And I think the most recent manifestation of that at the time we're recording this is Tucker Carlson's platforming of Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
Nick Fuentes is, in my opinion, an extremely negative cultural influence. He has a big following already, or Tucker wouldn't have brought him onto his show, but not nearly the kind of reach of Tucker Carlson. I don't know what his reach is now. But Fuentes is...
it's more.
It's more than what it was.
Yeah.
And Fuentes is... he's very anti-Semitic, and his followers are very anti-Semitic. And so the rise of this, I think, is quite alarming. And then when you see kind of mainstream conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation defending Tucker for this, Kevin Roberts, who's a Fox News guy, going on and defending Tucker for platforming Nick Fuentes. That's not good. What that shows is that shows a real internal shift within conservative ideology in America.
I think you're confusing two things.
Okay.
I
hope I am.
I hope you are. I think there is a strong anti-liberal bias in Nick Fuentes, meaning sort of Christian nationalist, proto-fascist, anti-liberal, Republican, democratic direction to that.
Yeah.
I wonder if those who are defending Tucker Carlson's right to interview this guy, now you could argue, and I have heard people do it. I haven't seen the Tucker Carlson interview, but that it was rather light. It wasn't
softball.
It was not as hardball as one would have hoped. But
well,
you
not
know, maybe
nearly like he was with Ted Cruz, for example. I mean, he really laid into Ted Cruz.
Right. Well, Ted Cruz is also. I mean, one could argue that maybe Tucker Carlson is losing his liberal values, despite now kind of being libertarian and set free from corporate his corporate overlords, but and maybe becoming attracted to Christian nationalism, which is unliberal, anti-liberal. So and there's definitely a correlation between anti-liberal views and the tolerance of anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. So I think when the Heritage Foundation defends somebody's right to have anyone they want on their radio program, they're attempting to defend liberal values.
Yeah, but
they didn't. Yeah. They didn't condemn the bad idea.
You think the Heritage Foundation was approving of anti-Semitism?
You could say so tacitly, not explicitly, but tacitly by doing that. And the issue is not only one of rights. Yeah. I mean, yes, Tucker has the right to put anyone he wants on his show. He could put the Grand Wizard of the Klan on his show if he wants to, and he has that right. But he also has a moral responsibility as someone with a huge platform.
I mean, he has the largest conservative platform of any individual,
I'm not comfortable with telling anyone because they have the largest platform that they can't have someone on as an interviewee.
I'm not saying that can't. I'm not
or
saying
shouldn't.
I mean, why? Wait! Just before this podcast
we can criticize
started,
him. I agree with you. We can criticize him absolutely, 100% for doing that. But the fact of it, I mean, I don't know. I want a free exchange of ideas, which means anybody can interview anybody they want.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Here's what I'll say. I'm going to try to be reasoned. First of all, Tucker Carlson, when he had Nick Fuentes on his show, and it was a very sort of gentle kind of interview. None of the sort of what on any given day in any other, would be considered really controversial and provocative ideas. Those things were not significantly poked or sort of unpacked.
Right.
The other thing I want to say here, and I don't want to be ageist, but Nick Fuentes is 27 years old. And what I want to know is why is someone being given a platform like that when there are like Hill staffers who've got degrees in political philosophy who will never see the light of day because their senator or congressman has them locked away in some back closet reading legislation. But we're going to put this guy on this show who was brought to popularity because he was a streamer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like, what is wrong with us?
Yeah, and his followers are called groypers.
Groypers.
Which is just an ugly word.
And now I know I sound like a snob right now.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about governance, I mean, like, ideas matter.
Right.
But the idea of cancel culture also matters.
I'm not trying to cancel him. What I'm saying is
no one's trying to cancel
yeah,
him.
I'm not. Yeah, and I'm not even saying he can't have his bad ideas. What I'm saying is why is it a terrible idea for Tucker Carlson, who's likely old enough to be this guy's dad, to not look
for sure is.
Yeah, look at this guy and sort of, with all of his life experience and knowledge of history, theoretically, look at him and be like, surely we know where these ideas go.
Well, except if Tucker Carlson actually, I mean, I don't watch Tucker Carlson. I'm not a Tucker Carlson fan, so I don't want to talk too much about somebody I don't pay attention to. But if, which probably puts me on, I don't know, some outer Mongolian cultural, which I'm happy with. I'm good with that, right? But
Scott's moving to Mongolia.
if
let's focus here,
not
people.
there's anything wrong with Mongolia. What I'm trying to say is there has the resistance to repeating the cancel culture of the same, 5 minutes ago where this was a huge thing, and saying I don't want to participate in anything like that with regard to Tucker Carlson is not the same thing as saying I approve of even the direction Tucker Carlson is going. Sure. I mean, Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin, which seems to have some affinity for a kind of Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox state, right? There's this theocratic, or at least going back a winsomeness, shall we say, for the state, Christian states of the previous, not the previous century, but the century before that. So where you had Christian nations, where you had the German nation overseen by the emperor, who was, the head of the German Protestant movement, kind of second to God. You have the King of England, who is the head of the Church of England. You have this, the relationship of the Russian Church to the Russian Orthodox Church to Russia, the relationship of the Greek Orthodox Church to Greece. All of these ethnic, state affiliated churches. There seems to be a winsomeness which the United States has always set itself apart from. And now somehow those ideas of kind of 19th century state churchism seem to have some resonance. I'm very uncomfortable with that, partly because I think it doesn't lead to actual Christianity.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No. And we can get to that kind of post-liberal move in a minute. But I do want to say on the issue of canceling, I'm not saying that Nick Fuentes should be canceled, and I'm
Yeah.
not saying that people shouldn't talk to him. What I am saying is that if you're Tucker and you're going to have him on your show, you have a moral responsibility to drill down into the ethical implications of what Nick Fuentes is saying and hold him to account for these things. We know where anti-Semitism leads.
Yeah.
We've seen it again and again historically.
Well, and
if Tucker will not drill down into that, then he's also morally culpable in this way.
Yeah.
Granted, and he's gotten, as is evident here, a lot of pushback from his own, side of the political spectrum. Right. Tucker has gotten a lot of pushback, which is, I think, exciting and good, because it shows there is a vitality of ideas, at least on the more right side of things, that are willing to say, no, Tucker, you're morally responsible for this. And there's people who will say, it's right, we're not going to participate in cancel culture, and it's also correct that you're allowed to talk to whomever you want.
This might be cynical, and I can own that.
We are a Gen X podcast, Maggie, so cynicism is...
Well, here's my concern, and here's, take it for what it's worth. I think that actually we're in a state right now, culturally in a state where media is more powerful than governance. It's more powerful than education. It's more powerful than if you have the media platform to put an idea out there, then you have the power. And I think that Tucker Carlson, I don't know if it matters how much pushback he gets, because he actually has influence over the workings of the political sphere. Mm-hmm. And I think
that's a very dangerous line of reasoning.
I'm not saying,
because if you say that those who we need, this was the left's, 15 minutes ago, the left's argument, we have to control X. We have to control the media's ability to allow ideas to go, because that might result in a political situation that we don't like.
Oh, I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying that's where I think we are because of that. I'm saying I think that the right side is sort of caught up, and they are implementing that same strategy and weapon. I mean, look at when, and now I guess you could say, wait, let me finish,
okay,
man.
Sorry.
Scott? I mean, I think you could say that it goes back. Do you remember when Bill Clinton was on the Arsenio Hall show?
And he played the saxophone?
Saxophone.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this the other day because someone was talking about this Tucker Carlson. Dude, your name. Hard to say. And also, who's the other guy who was an MMA wrestler? He's got a big podcast. Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, you can tell I listen to that a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, when you know that media has become powerful, we have just had a slow increase into political figures accessing popular culture to get younger and younger voters. And I think that what has happened is that the media consuming public, which tends to be, it's aimed at younger people, and the political sphere have met. And they've been like, let's be friends. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't matter if Nick Fuentes is 27 years old. He was a streamer on, I forget what gaming platform. Most of the people who follow him are a huge number of them probably aren't even old enough to vote yet.
The groypers.
Yeah. But here's what I'm going to say. Doesn't matter, because they will be one day. Mm-hmm. And this is totally
But are you making
sounding.
an argument, therefore, that media should engage in controlling what the groyper / future
Absolutely
voters
not. I'm not. No, I'm not. No.
Access to ideas so that they will be in what we want.
No, absolutely not. I am anti-control. I am for agency. I am for the sanctified will. And what I'm saying is I want people to pay attention to what is happening, because I think at least among Christians, we have lost our ability to discern the things that are of God and are not of God. And we just think, we don't want to think carefully. We don't want to think in nuanced ways because it's uncomfortable. It means saying, for instance, if you are a conservative, I just said this on Saturday, and a very nice woman told me that she didn't like it. But if you are, say, for instance, you categorize yourself broadly as a conservative, that doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with every single thing that is also every idea that is within that category. Okay.
Right.
You make distinctions until you sort of narrow yourself down to your individual sort of set of virtues, values, whatever. But because we are in a polarized culture and society, people don't want to seem like they're breaking rank. They want their team to win.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing
That's
is no, yes, you always break rank with a bad, immoral idea. If you're a Christian, you always do that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that. I do think that I've heard sort of the big media platforms described as functioning like shadow governments in the sense that they have, in such profound ways, controlled the flow of information and influenced people so significantly. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's good. And I'm definitely not for cancel culture, but I am for morality. And so I think when you have a platform as big as Joe Rogan or Tucker or any of these guys, you're responsible for what you say, and you're responsible for what your guests say and the way in which you might affirm or challenge what they say. And sometimes simply not challenging an idea is a tacit affirmation of those ideas.
And I do agree that it is right and good.
It is a right and good thing.
Yes.
We're doing the Eucharistic liturgy now.
To challenge to call out Tucker Carlson for his glazing of Nick Fuentes,
Yeah.
which is it's unacceptable, honestly, to do that to anyone. It's sort of pathetic, as if you're going to call yourself any sort of journalist.
Right.
It doesn't matter to whom it is, right? And to say that it's immoral, I think that's also
Yeah.
fine. You know, you have power, and therefore you are responsible for exercising that power in a way that is for the common good. Now, if Tucker Carlson is sympathetic, and it seems like he must be, at least to certain Christian nationalistic ideas, but you know, the thing is, with anti-Semitism, they're coming for Christians next, for sure, even in so-called Christian societies. So you are...
Or the wrong kind of Christians, right? Like what a lot of people are pushing for right now is some form of theocracy. I mean, you mentioned the post-liberal move earlier, you know, and what we see is a lot of people now saying liberalism is dead. Liberalism has run its course. It's obviously headed in a bad direction because we don't share any kind of common values anymore. And unless we had, you know, without some common set of ideas of what the common good involves, a liberal democracy can't function.
And this gets back to sort of, you know, you see the theocratic arguments largely on the side of more Reformed
And Catholic.
Because both of those are visions of... Wow, that's interesting. But obviously, one is a state church. The other has been a state church. You know, Roman Catholic has often been associated very closely with ruling governments. Reformed notions in Geneva, of course, Scotland, all these places where a kind of theocratic understanding of what government is supposed to do in terms of enforcing good ideas upon the populace is not very Wesleyan, where you believe that sanctification of the will is the goal, as you mentioned earlier, and that involves agency.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's also why it involves allowing bad ideas to be expressed in society and reliance not on the flesh, which is the state, to impose something, quote, Christian, unquote, which really isn't because it doesn't involve agency, therefore there's no real love.
Yeah.
But you have to actually rely on the Holy Spirit's power to get humans to yield through the power of good ideas. That faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, which means you have to have the word of God preached. You have to have the genuine gospel out there engaging in the marketplace. This is the Wesleyan market cross, right? You go in the morning, you preach at the market cross to whomever will hear, and you invite them into something deeper. You do not impose that you have to, as it was in New England, everybody has to go to church on Sunday. Whether you aren't a member of the church, but you have to go to church and you have to tithe to the church, right? Do we want that kind of theocratic world? And I think that's attractive when we've seen liberalism, which is actually, the problem is that the liberalism that is being critiqued wasn't very liberal.
Because it's a linguistic. There's a lot of linguistic slippage here.
Yes.
And in terms of, on the one hand, we talk about a liberal democracy. We mean a democracy where a representative government that
with checks and balances
that
Yes,
is
representative of the
based on
people.
the basic idea of human dignity,
Yeah.
the innate human dignity of all people.
Yeah.
And so
Made in the image of God.
the idea is that all people get a say in what's happening here. Now, the United States hasn't always realized that entirely.
Yeah.
But at the same time, moving into look, I mean, I think part of the reason that Western Europe is so secular today is because of all of look, there were 300 years of religious wars in Europe, and these theocracies that they had, or Christian states that they had, it didn't work out, right? First of all, there are a lot of wars over what kind of Christian state we want to have.
Yeah.
Do we want to be a Protestant Christian state? Do we want to be a Catholic Christian state?
When you say 300 years, what 300 are we talking about?
I'm talking.
Are you talking about wars between states or civil wars with religious overtones like you have just after the Reformation?
Well, I'm really talking about both of those things,
Okay.
but especially after the Reformation. I mean, I think that the religious wars, the internal religious wars within states, begin to. That's where these begin, right, with the Reformation.
This is part of the problem when you align a certain theology with an ethnicity. Suddenly, ethnicities have, and states with weapons now have theological reason to kill someone else.
And even at the end of the 18th century, you get the French Revolution, which in a way it wasn't a religious war; it was kind of an anti-religious war, right? It was a bloody revolt against not just a monarchy, but the ideas that were associated with religion. And
because the Catholic Church in France had become a little too cozy with a tyrannical government.
And so, if you look at from the beginning of the Protestant Reformation until, let's say, it ends with the French Revolution, that's not quite 300 years, but it's close to it. And so I think that history has borne out that these kinds of theocratic states don't work in the way that we think that they're going to. We've got enough historical distance from them that we could kind of idealize them, or we say, oh, it'll be better this time, or it'll work this time. If people just adopt my vision of the theocratic state, then it will work. If we just have Reformed theonomy, then it will work. If we just have Catholic integralism, then it will work. But it's not going to work.
No.
In the way that people think it's going to work.
Because some of us aren't going to be Reformed or Catholic.
Exactly. So what are the implications of that,
Well,
right? If
yes, you are.
If you're in a Reformed state, what happens if you're a Jew in a Reformed state?
Well, we have this example because Prussia was a Reformed state.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what happens if you're Catholic in a Reformed state, Or what happens if you're a Methodist in a Catholic state?
just-
We know
you know?
what happens to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what happened. I mean, after the wars of religion in France and the English Civil War and of course the 30 Years' War in the Holy Roman Empire, you have you are in it's rubble. The state is in shatters and the church is shattered, and this is where the movement that we call pietism actually emerges. That is transconfessional, heart religion, dependent on the Holy Spirit's work, out of which Methodism is birthed.
Yeah. So I am not on board with, I just want to go on record here. I am not on board with the whole theocratic movement
No.
that a lot of conservatives today are moving towards. I think it's very dangerous. How do we get there? Probably with a lot of bloodshed.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's a good idea.
Bloodshed's usually a bad idea.
Usually, yeah, I would say
Usually
so.
bad.
Sorry, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about how pluralistic our culture has become, and it's not a probably. It
Right.
just seems like it. Unless, my gosh, there's just no way. That would
Yeah.
be terrible.
So,
Or you
on-
end up with a baby food kind of veneer of Christianity over a statism, which is what you end up with all the time. I mean, this is what produced what we call liberal theology in Germany, is because they needed a theology that didn't mean anything in order to unite
To unify the
Lutherans and Reformed people
Yeah.
in one
geographic
generic
space.
Protestantism that could unite the empire, right? I mean, it's
Now, I do think that among kind of
Get
the anti-liberal crowd, and by liberal I don't mean progressivism, okay? I mean basically a representative
Oh
democracy.
my gosh, I'm so tired of explaining words.
But among the anti-liberal crowd, I think at least the theocracy crowd has some ideals that they want to put forward. I was very concerned by article that I sent the two of you by Rod Dreher.
Yeah. I was just looking at that
Who,
earlier.
sometimes I like what Rod Dreher writes, and sometimes Rod Dreher makes me kind of bananas. And he's a very unusual man, let's put it that way. But he was writing about some time that he spent. He lives in Hungary now, but he spent some time in Washington, D.C. with J.D. Vance and just talking to a lot of political types in Washington recently, and especially younger political types. And he was really concerned. I share his concern about the rise of anti-Semitism, Christian anti-Semitism, but also sort of a kind of nihilistic anti-Semitism. Not all of these Groyper types are, conservative Christians. A lot of them are kind of nihilistic, and he writes about this. And what
Yeah.
he says is, if you think being Christian, this is on his Substack, so if you think being Christian is some kind of vaccination against anti-Semitism, you're wrong. Even young Christians, especially trad Catholics, I learned, are neck deep in anti-Semitism. They even use it as a litmus test of who can and can't join their informal social groups. Not every DC Zoomercon who identifies with Fuentes agrees with everything he says or the way he says it. What they like most of all is his rage and willingness to violate taboos. I asked one astute Zoomer what the Groypers actually wanted, meaning what were their demands. He said they don't have any.
Yeah.
They just want to tear everything down. Then he went on to explain in calm, rational detail why his generation is so utterly screwed. The problems are mostly economic and material, in his view, and this is something echoed by other conversations. They don't have good career prospects. They'll probably never be able to buy a home. Many are heavily indebted with student loans that they were advised by authorities to take out, and the idea that they are likely to marry and start families seems increasingly remote. Moreover, they grew up in a country
Yeah.
that had lost its common culture. Many of these young men are fatherless. Most of them spent their youths being told that as whites, and especially as white males, they are what's wrong with the world. Their own speech was policed with Stasi-like ruthlessness for racism and bigotry, while people on left routinely slandered whites, males, Christians, and heterosexuals, and were even rewarded for it. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot in a few paragraphs, but I don't doubt that to some extent he's diagnosed some of these problems.
I mean, here's where I see the convergence of this. You have a group of people who, in the name of, quote, liberalism, were policed in that way. I mean, we all experienced it in academia, right? I mean, I know people who are a generation ahead of me who found the fact that they had to walk on eggshells in a classroom to make sure that they policed their own speech so that students wouldn't accuse them of something for which they could be canceled and lose their jobs.
Even with tenure. Yeah.
I mean, this was reality. So there is, in the name of, quote, liberalism, a now anti-liberal move that was actually kind of, like he said, Stasi-like oppressive. There's the fact that there's now an anti-liberal movement that wants to get back to a certain set of values, but what they don't realize is that the values, at least of this country, are liberal values.
Yeah.
So the values we have to get back to if we want a thriving church, which I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The church thrived in the early part of this nation because it had the ability to speak freely into the marketplace about the wisdom of the Logos and the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And demonstrate it.
Right.
That, once you remove that and you put kind of some sort of, I'll call it fleshly mechanism by which you impose that on people, which is the European model. I mean, you know, he's in Hungary. They're afraid of the loss of their culture. I get it. I'm afraid of the loss of our culture, but I'm afraid of the loss of the kind of culture that produced the dynamism of the first and second Great Awakenings and produced also the freedom economically and politically to voice your opinions that we have had in the past in this country. Now, thanks to corporatism and some other things that have at least most recently restricted that. But you've got new media in the same way that you had new media at the time of the Reformation that allowed ideas to get out there, and that can be destabilizing. And we're in a period of destabilization.
Yeah, we certainly are. Well, let's talk then. Let's finish this up with just kind of some theological reflection on some of this.
Yeah. Something helpful.
Something helpful. I mentioned earlier the notion among kind of classical liberalism of innate human dignity, but that's a notion that came out of Christianity, right? That the Enlightenment sort of took this ideal out of Christianity. This is an argument along the lines of the kind of thing that Tom Holland has made about the Christian roots of the ideals of Western culture. And if we lose that idea of innate human dignity, which seems to be happening again,
which is the image of God.
Yeah, which is the image of God.
Yeah.
That's a massive loss. And I think sort of if Dreher is not exaggerating, if he is correct, that among a lot of these younger trad Catholics, there is this notion, and I don't know if this is true or not. But
the trad Catholics I know are not anti-Semitic, so
yeah, that's good to know. But to the extent, let's say any Christian, okay, has this notion, they've become incoherent because the notion of innate human dignity, the notion that we are all created in the divine image, that we bear the divine image, it may be obscured by sin, but we nevertheless bear to the divine image. should prevent any Christian from moving in the direction of anti-Semitism. That doesn't mean you can't critique the state of Israel, but it does mean that the kind of anti-Semitic ideas that are becoming commonplace now in the U.S. and Western Europe are irreconcilable with some basic truths of our faith. Any thoughts on that?
It also doesn't mean you can't criticize, Judaism as a religion and say, look, I actually think the Messiah has come.
Right. We're not
Jesus
Jews.
is your Messiah, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't a real exchange of ideas. It's where you put coercion behind those ideas that becomes problematic.
Yeah.
I think what in this whole conversation and in the general sort of consumption of this stuff that's happening out there in the world, for the individual Christian, I think what is important to remember is that what you can control is your decision making in day-to-day life, and that your job is not to necessarily fix these things, but to speak to the people in your sphere.
Yeah.
Because bad ideas are very easily, I think, in some ways, inoculated with the person-to-person experience of loving Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have all sat down at Thanksgiving dinner and maybe experienced the opposite, or we've had difficult conversations with people who are just coming from different places. But I'm thinking about these young men, who want to tear everything down, or young women who just are like, forget this, I'm out, I'm going to do paganism. I think it's important to not be offended by bad ideas. You can not like them, you can speak against them, but it's important to just not be offended, because, to your point, the image of God, the person who's presenting them bears the image of God, and our job is to present the image of God in a more sanctified presentation and invite them to say, hey, you don't have to think, you could be free of this hopelessness, or however that conversation takes place. But I think I'm just thinking about people who are having conversations, real live conversations right now with people who are adopting anti-Semitic ideas. And they are reaching out to people who have more theologically grounded ideas. And I'm grateful for that, even though the conversations are strange. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, that's just my thought. Like the work of, I keep wanting to say conversion. It's not the right word, but this work is relational. Mm-hmm. It's person-to-person relational.
Yeah.
And I guess I want Wesleyans to, first of all, step up, reclaim their theological foundations, and have the ovaries and the cojones to get out there and talk about what they believe. Because the idea that our sanctification is a sanctification of our will, right? We have, our sanctification is dependent on agency, and their sanctification is dependent on their agency. Yeah. And so if we want saved people, and if we want a saved society, we need a society that is yielded to not to the power of the state, not to the power of somebody who is proclaiming some ideas or can control the media or whatever, but the power of the Holy Spirit. And that will transform society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
But Wesleyans need to get into the marketplace of ideas in a more robust way than we have been lately. We have to know what we think, first of all. That's also important. Educate yourself.
Yeah,
we're working on that.
There.
Generations of mainline Methodism, at least, that has dumbed down Christianity.
Yeah. All right, friends. Well, that's been our podcast. podcast.
Well, that was fun and
Yeah.
really, really happy.
Yeah.
So thanks for that, David.
Well,
It's
Jeez.
an important topic.
yeah. Yeah, and Jesus is Lord. I mean, you can tear down everything you want, but the church prevails. So, at the end of the day, there's that. That's been our episode for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please, if you enjoyed this, give our show a 5-star review because it helps people find us, and we will come back to you in the next conversation.